If Fex wasn't consuming the blood of every human he came into contact with, that would suggest that it didn't have the same effects on him as it did on Quinn. It would be understandable if he was doing it for reasons to not be caught. However, he already had these 7 people in the room, yet he didn't consume blood from a single person. "System, what is the meaning of this?" Quinn asked. "I think you've figured it out already," the system replied. "As I've said to you before, your vampire powers are unique, different from the others. What applies to you doesn't mean it will apply to them, and the same can be said the other way around. But this, Quinn, this is your advantage over the others. Certain vampires had weird habits. It was probably because they were either stuck indoors or mostly stuck in the dark all the time. This was what was going through Fex's head as he looked at Quinn. Even Fex was considered weird for having so much interest in humans, but so far his experiences with them hadn't been great. No one would talk to him, and of the very few interactions he had with all of them, he was attacked, first by Aaron, then by his 2 roommates. Finally, when the female student's leg was fully healed, Peter no longer felt weird about eating the leg in front of him. Before, he felt like he was eating a part of her, but now that he could see that she was fine, he couldn't let it go to waste. The first bite was the hardest, but once he got the juicy taste of flesh into his mouth, he couldn't stop. He continued until almost nothing was left but the bone. "Ghouls, little bit of a messy eater, aren't they?" Fex said, trying to crack a joke. But Quinn was in no laughing mood. "Quest update. 3 of 7 pieces of human flesh have been consumed by ghoul Peter Chuck." Once again, the energy surged through Quinn's body, but he knew it wasn't him getting stronger, but Peter instead. But this message had only soured his mood, realizing he would need to do this 4 more times. "Maybe we should just take the easy way?" Quinn thought for a brief moment, but quickly changed his mind. They took off the blindfold from the girl, and then Fex started to use his influence skill. His red eyes glowed, and so did the females he was looking at. She appeared dazed, as if she was unaware of anything around her, as if she was asleep, but with her eyes open. Fex gave simple instructions of what happened that night. He was sure not to overcomplicate things, and at the same time not give too many details, otherwise it could cause problems with her mind. The last thing he mentioned was telling her to sleep for another hour. While one of them watched the hallways for any oncoming students, the other would carry them and put them in a place where it would be a while before a student spotted them. Certain sections of the library, just outside the staircase on the top floors, and so on. "What if someone sees them?" Peter asks. "There are students who are knocked out all the time, although to the watch system it will just appear like they are sleeping. Everyone else will think something happened to them," Borden explained. "Think about it. While you were sleeping outside the room, apart from the first day, did people bother you?" Peter knew Vorden was right, and he felt like Peter only gained extra attention because he was a level 1. But after the first day, several students just ignored Peter like he was some homeless dog left on the street. After they finished doing everything they needed to do, they left Fex in his room on his own. "If you need me, you know where to find me," Fex said. As he saw the 3 boys walk off, Fex started to feel a little bored. Everything that happened today was one of the first interesting things that had happened to him since he got to the human world. Then, when they thought about it, it was one of the most interesting things he had done in his life so far. The day had arrived, and Peter wasn't feeling hungry this morning, as he had eaten a meal last night, but that still didn't mean there wasn't a list of jobs they needed to do. They had more problems right now than just trying to find meat for Peter. Because Duke was hot on their heels. They needed to convince him that somehow Peter was learning the ability books handed to him. So the 3 decided to once again split up for the morning. Vorden had memorized the students who had the regenerative ability, and at breakfast he would try to track them down and find out what club classes they go to and when would be the best time to nab them. While Peter and Quinn had decided to pay a little visit upstairs to the VIP area. Their aim for today was to visit Logan. Not once had Quinn seen Logan in the canteen area, and he realized he never saw Logan around the school much even before that. While also training in the pod that Logan had, he realized he never really left the room, and there was no need for him to. The VIP room had facilities such as a shower and a toilet, and whenever he wanted, he could call and ask for food from the shop to be delivered to his door. "Long time no see," Logan greeted as this time he answered the door still with bags under his eyes. When he finished rubbing his eyes, though, he noticed someone else behind him. "It looks like you brought a friend with you as well this time." They entered the room and Peter couldn't stop looking at all the strange gadgets inside. He also noticed the level 8 on Logan's watch, which frightened him a little. When did Quinn get to know someone so powerful? He thought. Once he sat down, Quinn started to explain what he wished Logan to do. However, this time, Quinn was afraid Logan would decline. He had already asked so much from him, and he had nothing to give back in return. But without saying anything, he put on his metallic glove and got to work on the watch while it was still in Peter's hand. After a few minutes, he sat back in his chair. All done for you, he said. Now onto the watch. The number 2 was permanently displayed. If we want to come back and increase the number, are you okay with that, Logan? I thought you might ask something like that, so I already did it for you, Logan said. If you twist the top of the watch, then the numbers will change, going from 1 up to 6. So you will be able to fool anyone into thinking you have a high ability. Every time I work on something, I just impress myself more and more. Quinn was feeling even more guilty Logan hadn't even asked any questions about why he needed to do such a thing, and was providing his services for free. If you ever need any help, Logan, feel free to ask me. I know you probably don't need me too much, but even if it's for testing something in the game, please, I want to help you. With that said, it was almost time for the combat classes to begin, and the two of them had to leave. As they left the room, Logan quickly booted up his computer and started typing away until he suddenly stopped. If I do this, he will probably never trust me again. It was nice speaking to a person for once, rather than a machine, Logan said. But at the same time, I can tell you are hiding things from me, and I can only help you if I know more. Recording device activated, the computer system said. He could now hear everything when he activated the recording device inside Peter's watch. When Quinn had first come in and made the request, he had explained that his system had hidden the level of his actual ability. It made sense why he needed to adjust the score on his watch. This was why when Logan saw Peter and they had made the same request, it secretly made Logan happy inside. He thought that perhaps Peter had been put under the same type of system that Quinn had. He saw Quinn as a friend now and was happy to help him, but his urge to find out about the system far surpassed that of their weak bond. Upon touching Peter, he realized how he was disappointed. He didn't have the same reaction as he did upon touching Quinn. This meant, right now, he couldn't think of a reason why Peter would need to change his level. If it was something as simple as to avoid others from bullying him, it was too risky to do. Once they found out how weak he was, they would report him, and the watch would be replaced. The only thing he could think of was, Quinn and Peter were hiding something from him, so he came up with a plan to implant a recording device into the watch. At first, he was originally going to do this with Quinn. However, he and Quinn got close. He enjoyed the small conversations they would have. He decided it wasn't right to invade his privacy and believed Quinn would eventually tell him. When Quinn had first come in and made the request, he had explained that his system had hidden the level of his actual ability. It made sense why he needed to adjust the score on his watch. This was why when Logan saw Peter and they had made the same request, it secretly made Logan happy inside. He thought that perhaps Peter had been put under the same type of system that Quinn had. He saw Quinn as a friend now and was happy to help him, but his urge to find out about the system far surpassed that of their weak bond. Upon touching Peter, he realized how he was disappointed. He didn't have the same reaction as he did upon touching Quinn. This meant, right now, he couldn't think of a reason why Peter would need to change his level. If it was something as simple as to avoid others from bullying him, it was too risky to do. Once they found out how weak he was, they would report him, and the watch would be replaced. The only thing he could think of was, Quinn and Peter were hiding something from him, so he came up with a plan to implant a recording device into the watch. At first, he was originally going to do this with Quinn. However, he and Quinn got close. He enjoyed the small conversations they would have. He decided it wasn't right to invade his privacy and believed Quinn would eventually tell him. It was time for the two to split up. Peter would head to the elemental class with Vorden, while Quinn would head to his normal weapons class. During the start of the lesson, they continued to go through the kicks that had been done the other day. Quinn worked on perfecting them, while in his head imagining the feeling of blood swiping going through his legs. Usually, he would just have to think about activating the skill, and the system would do the rest for him. The energy inside his body moved on its own, but he could still feel everything that happened were only automatic. If he wanted to combine his blood swipe with his leg techniques, he had to recreate that feeling in his legs while throwing out a kick. It was too bad his mind had been preoccupied with other things. Otherwise, Quinn would have loved to test it out right now. While practicing, he noticed once again that Fex was standing by his own. Not a single person had approached him. It was to the point where Fex was just lying about and looking at the ceiling in boredom. Now Leo didn't do anything about students who didn't want to learn. In his opinion, in the end, it was up to them if they wanted to participate or not. However, if they were to disturb the class, he would deal with them. Seeing this, Quinn decided to approach Fex. He didn't feel like Fex was a bad person, but more like a child who didn't know what was right and wrong. If Quinn could just approach him and get close, maybe he could learn more about the vampires that might be after him. "Hey, do you want to spar?" Quinn asked. Fex got up from the floor and looked around him, noticing that there was only one person, Quinn, who was speaking to him. "Who, me?" Fex asked, tilting his head a bit. Quinn nodded. "Maybe I can use my full strength against you this time." "Yeah, right. But if you insist on an arse-kicking, then I'll be happy to give you one," Fex replied with a smile. Fex was a good fighter, and Quinn was hoping to learn from him. If in the future he did become his enemy, it would be useful to learn how not only he fought, but how others fought as well. There was also the fact that recently Quinn had gotten a stat boost. He knew he wasn't as powerful as Fex yet, but maybe slowly, as he consumed more people's blood, he could change that. The two of them sparred using the kicking techniques only, and Leo also noticed that Fex could perform the kicks quite well. It seemed like he was performing them badly before just because he didn't want to. Still, the two of them knew not to show their true strength or speed, otherwise the others around them would start to get suspicious. While Layla and Aaron were practicing their kicks against each other, Layla noticed Aaron was incredibly distracted and was constantly looking over where Quinn and Fex were. She was never interested in Quinn before, even after learning he was a vampire, so it had to mean she was looking at Fex instead. After last night, she tried to repeat the movements while she was under control multiple times, but they just weren't right. She wanted to feel them one more time. She felt like she was close, but something was just missing. But as she looked at Fex's face, it filled her with disgust. She would never allow herself to be controlled by another person. In another training hall, the elemental class was taking place again. Vorden and Peter did their usual thing, keeping their distance from one another, but at the same time not too far. The lessons usually started with an explanation, demonstration, and then students would try to replicate what they were being taught. At the end of each lesson, there was free time. Students could practice fighting against each other, or practice on their own trying to perfect and get a hang of their skills. So far, the whole lesson had passed without anything happening, and it was only in the last part that the same men that approached Peter the other day had approached him once again. "So, Peter, I see you finally reached the level 2 Earth ability, but your progress is a little slow, don't you think?" The student who had approached had quite a skinny frame, and it looked like he hardly had any fat on him. His face was even sunken in by the cheekbones. It was as if fate had decided how he would look from birth, since the name given to him by his parents was Bones. Although Bones himself didn't look intimidating, Vorden could see he was confident when approaching Peter. While looking around, he saw a couple of other students also looking in their direction. They were probably working for Duke as well. "The Duke wants to make sure that you progress as fast as possible, and the easiest way of doing that is through a practical assessment, wouldn't you agree? Let's have a little spar." Although Vorden wasn't close enough to hear what they were saying, he was able to tell they were in some sort of trouble just from the look on Peter's face. Then, when he saw them walking off in a certain direction and clearing a space around the two of them, Vorden knew what was happening. They wanted to test his abilities, while Peter had no abilities. The room was filled with students practicing their elemental abilities, lost in their world. Most of them were in the room where Earth users, as that was the most common ability distributed throughout the world. It was also the easiest to raise a few levels, ability-wise, but if you wanted to reach the peak of the Earth's ability, you were required to join the military and move up. In one of the corners of the room, Peter had been taken by Bones, a tall, skinny student, who also had two other students by his side. They each formed a triangle-like position, with Bones in front of Peter, while the other two stood behind him. Vorden had his fair share of fighting experiences, and just from looking at this, he knew what they were planning to do. He quickly needed to think of a plan and started to look around the room, otherwise they were going to get caught. They couldn't risk Peter getting taken away now, not while he was still a ghoul. A single day without flesh would make him go crazy. And although Quinn believed Peter would remain silent, Vorden did not. "All right, Peter, it's time to see what you got," Bones said. However, Peter was far too nervous to hear Bones properly and was thinking about what to do to get out of this mess. "Why did these guys have to come and get me now?" Peter thought. "Is the watch not proof enough? These guys are still trying to ruin my life. Well, if I'm going to get caught anyway, I should just kill them." Just then, Peter managed to catch Vorden walking up from behind them and then walking to the side. "Come on, Peter, are you ready or what?" Bones shouted as he was starting to get agitated. Vorden was now standing next to them. He started to perform certain moves, and earth pillars and walls were created as he performed these moves. It was clear that Vorden had copied quite a high-level earth ability, but Peter was just wondering, what did that have to do with him? Then he noticed that Vorden was repeating the same set of moves and then pointing to himself afterwards. "Does he want me to copy him?" Peter thought, but just as he was wondering, he felt a blunt object hit him in the stomach. When he looked down at what had hit him, he noticed it was an earth pillar. "I don't have all day, you little—" Bones shouted. Peter was surprised at how little the attack had hurt. It was as if someone had given him a small nudge, but knowing the others would expect a reaction, he held his hands around his stomach and started to hurl forward. While continuing to look over at Vorden, Peter then looked at Bones and started to copy each action Vorden was doing. First was a step on the ground. An earth wall was then lifted from the floor. Vorden made sure to create a small one, trying to mimic a level 2 user. It was only because he had stolen a level 4 earth user's ability that he was able to still create earth skills at such a distance, and thankfully, the others were all distracted, looking at Peter. To the outside, it just looked like Vorden was practicing some form of martial arts. Peter then threw out his palm, imitating Vorden, and the earth wall formed a worm-like shape, still attached to the wall. "Is that enough for you?" Peter asked. Bones then walked up to the wall and placed his hand on it, lowering the wall down. He continued to walk forward until he was directly in front of Peter's face. An earth pole was formed into Bones' hand, and he whacked Peter right across the face, leaving a large red mark. A metallic taste filled Peter's mouth as he spewed blood from his mouth. Then he had to do everything to stop himself from just jumping on top of his Bones and ripping his neck. "That's for wasting my time. If you did that in the first place, we could have gone home already," Bones said as he started to walk away from the others. "Peter, make sure you reach level 4 in time, or else." As the three were leaving, Peter could do nothing but watch them go. He hated the fact that even though he now had the chance to fight them, he had to hide that fact. However, when Peter looked at the three people just about to leave the training room, he noticed Vorden was standing in front of them, blocking their path. "Hey guys, it seems like I have no partner in training today. Do you mind helping me out?" Vorden asked. "What the hell? Scram out of here," Bones said. "Oh, you're happy to practice with me right here and now," Vorden shouted, making sure everyone could hear. A few seconds later, Vorden was already casting his earth spells, aiming them at all three of them. The sudden attacks and Vorden's versatile use of the earth abilities didn't allow Bones and his men to last long. Vorden managed to give each of them a thorough beating without getting hit a single time back. Once classes were over for the day, Vorden and Peter met up together in the library. They each used a book to cover their faces as they talked to each other using the silencing orb. The orb meant that as long as no one was at the table, none of the others around them could hear. "Okay, so, do you remember the plan?" Vorden asked. "Tonight, I want to try to get all three of those regenerative ability users. There are 3 places where we can most likely get them. At dinner, we can follow them, just outside their dorm room, or before they return to their homeroom classes. All we have to do is convince each student and lead them to Fex's room to deal with the rest. Now this is important, Peter, because each of us is going to have our person you're going to follow. Me, you, and Quinn will each have one person, so don't mess this up, okay?" Although Peter was no longer weak like before, Vorden still couldn't rely on him. "What about the other?" Peter asked. "If I'm not satisfied after these, then does that mean we're going to have to kill more?" When Peter asked this, Vorden looked at him carefully. Usually a person would be quite worried, but Peter said those last words so casually. Did he change after killing Earl? Vorden thought. He's getting more dangerous. "Stop being such a hypocrite," Rayton said. Vorden chose to ignore Rayton's words for now. Technically, he wasn't being a hypocrite himself, because he had never done such things. "We will leave that to Quinn. I'm sure he will think of something in that time frame," Vorden replied. With that, the two of them had their targets that they would follow for the day. However, unknown to both of them, when they thought their conversation was protected and being kept secret by the sound orb, it wasn't, because Logan had heard everything. After hearing what Peter and Vorden had said, Logan wasn't shocked by it. His mind worked differently from others. It was very rare for him to feel any emotion, such as sadness or shock. It wasn't until he first discovered computers and programming that he started to feel the emotions of joy and excitement. So his reaction to hearing this wasn't normal, to say the least. He felt like he needed more information before coming to a logical conclusion. So far, there were 3 students involved: Vorden, Quinn, and Peter that he knew of. The words that stuck out most to him during the conversation were "kill again." Logan then proceeded to log on to his computer and started to access the school servers. Whenever he could hit a firewall or security breach, he would place his hand on the computer and close his eyes. "Please, I need your help. Would you let me in?" Logan asked. A few moments later, he was into the school system. Since the new school semester started, there were a total of 2 students dead that had been reported, one named Brandon and the other named Earl. When looking at the files, he also noticed that 2 students had been brought in for questioning, and one of them, for both cases, Quinn. If the 3 of them are friends, are they covering for Peter? Maybe the military was always close in their investigation, but never got the right person, Logan thought. This seemed to be the most logical conclusion, but then there were still a few things that didn't make any sense. Why would they be covering for a murderer? They couldn't have been that close, as no one knew each other before coming here. Unless they were directly involved, there would be no need for a cover-up. Then the second thing was the fact, why would there be a need for them to kill again? The way Peter had spoken had made it sound like an accident. The next thing Logan pulled up was a file on Fex, the student's name that was mentioned in their conversation. "Now things are starting to make less sense," he said. Fex was a new student who had only been here a few days and had been brought in for draft evasion. For some reason, there was a link between all these people, but Logan just couldn't find it. His heart started beating as the excitement of a mystery was about to be unlocked. He felt the same feeling he did when he was working on a new idea, and when he finally found the missing component, a rush of dopamine would be sent to his brain. There was one place that they would be at tonight, without fail, and that was the student's name, Fex. Before leaving, Logan grabbed a round ball-like object and started making some adjustments with his mechanical glove. Vorden had caught up with Quinn and given him information on his target, saying what homeroom class they were from and also what combat classes they would attend. Judging by the time of day, they were able to guess most likely where the student would be. Quinn had gone to one of the homeroom classes to find his target. Vorden had gone to wait outside the dorm area, and lastly, Peter to the canteen. As Quinn walked down the hallway where the students were just outside their homeroom, he would use his inspection skill on all those walking by. Vorden had given a description, but Quinn felt like using his inspection skill would allow him to spot the right person quicker in the crowd of people. As for how to convince the student to come with him, Quinn had wanted to test something. Finally, he found the student walking back toward the dorm room. Quinn quickly tapped the student on the shoulder. "What is it?" the student said, half annoyed as he turned, but he quickly changed his tone. "Oh, sorry, how can I help you?" he said with blush marks underneath his cheeks. He had never seen a student so handsome before. It was as if something was drawing him in. "Influence skill activated. Influence skill successful." Before approaching the student, Quinn had asked the system to allow his charm skills to go back to normal. He had increased his points by 2, and out of all the student's regenerative abilities, Quinn was tasked with the second weakest one. "Follow a few feet behind me. Don't say anything to anyone, understand?" The student nodded and continued to follow Quinn. Vorden found it quite easy to convince his student to do as asked after showing him his watch, threatening to beat the person if he didn't comply, and then finally it was Peter's turn. Dinner had ended, and he could see his target moving up and leaving the place, but he was also with a few of his friends as well. However, Peter managed to pluck up the courage and stand in front of the student. "I'm here to deliver a message," Peter said. "General Duke has asked me to take you to him at this moment." The student agreed to leave his friends and follow Peter. It was all going well for Peter so far. The student was following and asking him what the general wanted to see him about. Whenever he asked, Peter would reply, saying the general would never tell a low-level like him information about why. However, the problem started to occur when the student realized that Peter wasn't leading them to an office, but instead toward the dorm rooms. "Where are you taking me?" he asked. "Oh, I just need to grab a few things from my room first that I forgot," Peter replied. "I thought you said it was urgent." The student was now starting to get annoyed at Peter. This was bad, as there were still several students around, returning to their dorm rooms after leaving the canteen. It wasn't like Peter could knock him out there and then. "Is there a problem here?" a voice said. As the student turned around, he could see a black-haired student he didn't recognize, and suddenly his eyes lit up red. "Head over to room 224 and wait there," Fex commanded, and the student did as asked. "Thank you, but why are you out here?" Peter asked. "I had a feeling one of you might mess up this plan of yours, and out of everyone, I picked you. I've been following you since the canteen." The two of them entered Fex's room and tied up the student. They then sat together in silence as they patiently waited for the others, until Fex broke the silence. "Don't worry too much. Once this is done, you will evolve and no longer be required to do this type of thing. I honestly don't know why your Turner didn't prepare this all beforehand." "Well, he didn't understand what was going on. None of us do," Peter replied. "What do you mean?" Fex asked. But before Peter was able to give further details, a knock was heard at the door. Quinn had arrived first, and then Vorden only a few minutes after. They did the same procedure like last time and allowed Fex to tie the other two students up. Now laid on the floor were 3 students. "Well, are you ready to do this?" Fex asked. This time, when faced with the dilemma of choosing who should cut off the student's limbs, Quinn had volunteered. He was taking no chances while doing the work. It wasn't that he wanted to do it. It was because he felt like it was crueler to allow Peter's shaky hands to do the work. If the part wasn't cut clean, it would only cause more suffering. Rather than splitting it up into different days, they wanted to get rid of Peter's problem as soon as possible. If Peter was still hungry and they couldn't find a solution for the last one, then they could always rely on Vorden. "Here I go!" This time, however, Vorden immediately moved towards the amputated area and started to place his hands just above it. As he did, it began to heal far quicker than it normally would. "What's that?" Peter asked. "I decided to head to the nurse's office, faking that I had a temperature. The two of us touched, so I was able to copy her ability," Vorden explained. "I didn't want these guys to go through the same pain as the others." The healing ability, along with the regeneration ability, seemed to speed up the process by a great amount, and there wasn't even a lot of mess to clean up this time. And finally, they were done with everything. Thanks to Vorden's healing ability, the pain the students had suffered didn't weigh on their minds as much this time. Also, when in front of Peter, he too was starting to find it a bit easier. Vorden thought he was finding it too easy. "Looks like you're enjoying it," Vorden remarked before asking Peter, "Did mine taste any better?" A crude smile was shown on his face, and his eyebrow was slightly twitching. "Look, I'm not happy about this, but we have to make the best out of a bad situation," Peter said as he took another bite. It wasn't like he ever felt full. It was a strange feeling, but it was more like his hunger would disappear. And finally had finished the last one. "Remember to eat the bone too," Fex added. "Don't want to leave any evidence behind." Peter's jaw was now harder than most, and his whole digestive system had changed. So doing something like this was easy for him, although the bone didn't have much taste. Apart from the marrow inside, at least, he didn't churn it up like everything else he ate. 6 of 7 pieces of consumed by your ghoul. The message had appeared, and now there was only one person they had to find before Peter's evolved. Although the others weren't sure about the exact amount, they knew Peter must be close. Before Peter had eaten the pieces of leg, Quinn had also gotten a taste from each one of the students on the floor, adding to his overall stat points. Charm, 13. Strength, 20. Stamina, 18. With the 3 students' blood types, these were the stats that had been increased. "So, did you come up with any ideas for this last person?" Fex said as he sat down on his chair with his legs up on his desk. "I was thinking about this. What about Bones?" Peter suggested. "The person you met today? That's a bad idea," Vorden replied. "Number 1, did you even see that guy? I think you would have to eat his whole body to be satisfied. Secondly, he happens to work for Duke. You're already on his radar. But I think you're along the right line. We should pick someone who deserves it." "And how do we decide that?" Quinn said. If anyone deserves it, it would be Duke himself. Everyone is just doing what he says. Peter could have easily been doing the same thing to others once he went high enough up the ladder. Suddenly, while in the middle of their conversation, a beep sound was heard. They all recognized the sound well. It was when someone had access to the room and was returning to it. However, Fex had sent his 2 roommates away during this time, using his influence skill. He had tested it before, and knew their minds were weak and would obey the command, so it shouldn't have worn off. So just who was able to break into the room so suddenly like that? As the door opened, a small student with bags under his eyes was seen. His head quickly moved around the room, trying to process what was going on. 3 students tied up on the floor, in certain areas, and the rest casually standing around, Logan mumbled to himself. Logan had arrived in front of the door earlier, but he had decided to continue to listen in on their conversation. Perhaps he had misheard something, or the words they were saying meant something else. But after listening and deluding himself to the truth, he could no longer take it when they started to talk about candidates. He had to see for himself what was going on. The biggest shock to him, though, was one of the students had off. The other 2 had already healed in time, but the same couldn't be said for the last student. They all had different levels of regenerative ability, and his leg would take longer to heal. Logan immediately brought out the black sphere-shaped ball and pressed it against his chest. The small little spider-like robots started to spread and appear around his body at a lightning speed until they formed a mechanical suit. It looked similar to a miniature mech, only less clunky. As he lifted his hand, it started to form an oval cannon-like shape. 2 more of them started to form on top of his shoulders, and then he had his other hand pointed out. Each of them was pointed at a person in the room. "Don't you guys move, or I swear I will blast you all," Logan said. His voice had a slight echo to it, as it was projected through a type of speaker through the suit. "Quinn, did they put you up to this? If they're blackmailing you, I can help you out. I have connections, you know." "Logan, please," Quinn pleaded. "Put the weapons down. It's not what you think." "I can't, Quinn. If I lower these weapons and I don't know the truth, there's a higher chance for you all attacking me. And although I would like to trust you, Quinn, I have factored that there is also a high probability that you were involved in this case as well, and 2 previous cases before." When did he do so much research? Quinn thought. "What the hell are you guys waiting for? Looks like we found your next meal ticket," Fex said as he took a step forward. A few seconds later, though, a beam of blue light had hit Fex and sent him flying up against the room wall. "I did say that nobody should move," Logan said. A single step was all it took. Fex had moved a single step before Logan had decided to fire without hesitation, and the shot looked powerful. They could tell it was a powerful blow to cause Fex to go flying like that, and it seemed like he hadn't recovered from it because he was still lying on his front on the ground. While looking at Logan, Quinn could see that he wasn't reacting like he usually would. It was like he was shaken, but not from fear of what was happening. No, Logan was too strong of a person for that. It was something else. There weren't many people Logan had trusted, and although it wasn't a long time that they had spent with each other, it felt more special to Logan. No one had ever known as much interest in what he had worked on. Quinn would often ask questions about all his gadgets, and although he couldn't appreciate their true worth, he could tell he treated them with great care. But this fact had made him realize that the 2 of them weren't that close to each other at all. He now felt like Quinn had used him for his skills. "Logan, please just give us a chance to explain." At that moment, Quinn had taken a step forward. Logan automatically reacted to this and fired once again. "Wait, no!" Logan shouted. However, Quinn felt something like this might have happened, so he was prepared. Suing the shadow, he lifted it to block the energy shot, stopping it midair in the shadow. Then, moving out of the way, he moved his shadow with it, causing the shot to smash and go straight out the window. "We seriously need to stop wrecking these rooms," Borden said. "Quinn, I need an answer for all this, and one that makes sense. If everything doesn't and I feel like you are lying, well, I don't want to even consider that as an option. You'll understand when I explain everything. I wanted to tell you, Logan. Do you mind if just me and you speak alone?" Quinn asked. As Logan looked around the room, he realized that it would be the better option to just talk to Quinn. It would make it less likely for the others to plan anything while the 2 of them were talking. But Quinn wanted to talk to Logan alone for a different reason. Right now, he was the only one who knew about the system, and although Fex seemed like he was passed out on the ground, who knew if he was listening in or not? "Give me your neck," Logan demanded. "What? Why?" Quinn asked. "If you want me to trust you, then give me your neck," Logan said once again. Quinn did as asked and walked over while bending down slightly. Then, when Logan touched Quinn's neck, a part of his suit started to move and form a type of collar around Quinn's neck. "If you try anything funny, that collar will explode," Logan said. Although vampires had great healing abilities, he wasn't so sure he would be able to survive an explosion around the neck. The two of them left the room and headed upstairs to where Logan's room was located. After they left, Fex started to get up from the floor, and around his chest area, a burn mark could be seen. "Who would have thought that little twip would have been so strong?" Fex said as he touched his chest area. It was slowly starting to heal, but wasn't healing as fast as a regular wound, which was a first for Fex. He just wondered what that energy blast was made of. "Good thing I stayed on the floor. I was not ready for that one," he said. "Do you think Quinn is going to be okay?" Peter asked. "Logan is a level 8 user. I know Quinn's strong, but—" "We have to deal with this problem first," Borden said, pointing at the students on the floor. "Maybe Quinn can buy us some time, but if Logan reports us, they still can't do anything without any proof, so we need to get rid of the evidence as quickly as possible." The three of them nodded and got to work. Quinn and Logan were inside their room, and out of habit, Logan had gone to his usual seat when talking to Quinn. "All right, Quinn, I thought we had a fair deal before, but it seems you were hiding more from me than I originally thought, and although I have a great interest in the system, I cannot condone someone who goes around random people." Quinn was struggling to think about how to explain this to Logan. Not only that, but if he would believe him, and how would he react to the truth? While deep in his thoughts, an unexpected voice in his head was heard. "Let him touch you again," the system said. "His ability, I think I've figured out what it is. If you touch me, then it will allow me to speak to him, pass over everything I know, and explain everything that happened." Although Quinn thought it would be better if he explained it in his own words, at the same time, he felt like Logan might not believe him if he did. But if it came directly from the system, then there was a chance. "Logan, if you touch me, then the system will be able to explain everything. It will all make sense." Logan was still in his heavy miniature mech suit, apart from one of his hands that had been used to form a collar around Quinn's neck. While in the suit, he felt safe. "I'm putting my trust in you one more time," he said, as Quinn went over with his hand held out. When the two of their hands connected, instead of normal system message, Logan was able to speak clearly to the system. The system was then also able to show images of everything that had happened to Quinn so far, including all of the conversations they had. Usually, a normal human brain wouldn't be able to process all of this information at once, but it was being downloaded into Logan's mind like a hard drive. The system knew this would only work with someone like Logan. Quinn, on the other hand, had no clue what was happening, and could just see that Logan was remaining still. Then, after a few minutes, Logan let go of Quinn's hand. He then raised it and touched the collar around his neck, removing it, before sitting back down in his chair. "What happened?" Quinn asked. "I understand why you did what you did, Quinn. If I was in the same situation as you, I don't know how I would be able to handle it. Perhaps I would have chosen to seclude myself even further away from everyone. All the actions you took, I can't blame you, because in a way it was the only thing you could do." After receiving the information, Logan then tried to put himself in Quinn's shoes. Although some of the things he did were bad, could be avoided was a big question. This would ultimately make up Logan's mind whether Quinn was a bad person or not. After running multiple different scenarios in his head, he had found a couple of ways where he would have been able to have come out or done better, but Quinn had never made a truly misguided decision, and even now he was thinking of a way to turn Peter back to normal without hurting anyone. It made him happy to find out that Quinn's character and personality were still the same he thought it was. Still, what made him even happier was he was able to find out more details about the system. How was it possible that someone in this area could create an AI so complex? The AI itself reminded Logan of his ability. The two of them sat there for a while. Logan continued to think of all the things he had learned today. The fact that vampires were real didn't interest him as much as the system part, but now that the two of them were linked, he wanted to know more about them as well. Quinn had remained quiet, unsure how Logan had taken everything he had just learnt, and then Logan suddenly took off the suit, and it formed the original small black ball he had in his hand before. "You know," Logan said, "I can help you with your problem." "Problem?" "Getting the flesh. There is a way," Logan replied. The three boys had worked fast this time, and because they were in a rush, even Fex had to help beyond his determined contribution, an unusual trait of the young man, for the reason that he was afraid of getting caught. Rather than simply using his influence skill to clear their minds, he also commanded them to follow him. Then, whenever they arrived at a safe place or a random hall, he would break the skill, allowing their minds to be cleared. It also returned them to normal as if nothing had ever happened. The group did the very same thing to all three students, and they were all fully healed as normal. "What are we going to do about the window?" Peter asked. "Don't worry, I can deal with that. I will just make the other two students in the room think that they were in a fight. They can just take the blame," Fex said. Although Fex was growing a bit tired since he had used his influence skill a lot today, taking up his mental energy, he merely held out to achieve their goal. However, he would need a good rest after everything was over and done with. "Should we check up on Quinn?" Peter asked. "You two can go, but I don't want to get blasted again," Fex said as he looked down, noticing that his wound had finally healed. Just then, the beep sound of the door was heard. Knowing that it wasn't going to be Fex's roommates, everybody prepared themselves for the worst to come. Nevertheless, when they saw Logan enter the room with Quinn trailing him, they were able to relax a little. There were no teachers, and Logan no longer looked frightening without him donning the mech suit. "It's okay, guys, Logan knows everything," Quinn said. "Everything?" Peter asked. They thought that Quinn had lied, perhaps, or had only told the truth about Peter. But in reality, Logan knew more than everyone in the room. Logan now knew about the system as well as the vampires. Logan then pointed at Peter, and as he spoke to each person, he would move along to the next. Logan said, pointing, "You are a vampire like Quinn. Also, you're a strange person who seems to be wrapped up in this, more so than you should be. My conclusion is that you are crazy." Peter looked towards Vorden and could see his eyebrow was twitching up and down. If there was one word that Vorden didn't like, it was the word crazy. "Anyway, I propose we all head upstairs to my room, because I have a solution to your little eater problem. Follow me." Logan left the room and Quinn followed behind while signaling to the others that it was all right to do so. "You guys can go ahead without me," Fex said. "I've done my part, so there are no more favors in between us. I did my thing and you did your thing." As the others left the room, Fex was finally able to lie down on his bed. The wound and the strain from the multiple uses of influence skill had drained all his energy. He didn't follow them because he didn't want to be seen as weak in front of the others, afraid that they might use it as a chance to get rid of him. "I'll just go ahead and close my eyes," Fex said, as he nearly instantly went to sleep. The boys, except for Fex, had finally made it into Logan's room and made sure that the door was firmly shut behind them. "Are you sure this isn't all a trap, Quinn? How is this guy meant to help us?" Logan whispered. "I don't know," Quinn replied. "He hasn't told me anything yet, but I trust him. He helped me out with the watch and knew about my shadow abilities, yet still didn't tell anyone. I see no reason for him to tell others about this as well." Logan then logged into his computer as usual. From the surface of the computer screen, a light shone out and a projection appeared, allowing the others to see everything that Logan was doing. "The problem is that you need a fresh piece of correct? But the can be rotten, so going to the cemetery is not an option. You also couldn't sneak into the hospital due to the surveillance cameras," Logan explained. He then went on to a certain site. It looked exactly like the marketplace where Quinn had gone on to buy his equipment, only this was slightly different. Instead of a white background on the web page, it was black. "I will introduce you to a whole new world you probably didn't even know existed," said Logan. "We call this the Dark Marketplace. It contains items that aren't allowed to be sold in the regular marketplace. It even has a request board, one that can evade the eyes of the government." "What kind of things are on there?" Peter asked. "Sometimes they will ask someone to steal information from their competitors. Usually, if there is something that you want to get, you can find it here," said Logan. "I've heard of this before," Vorden said, "but I had no clue how to access it. It seems like only certain people within a group know how to. My family said they would let me know once I am old enough." "That's because the Dark Marketplace only allows certain individuals to get a membership. However, my ability allows me to bypass any restrictions, and I can log in with no worries." Logan then typed into the search bar, and straight away, what they were looking for appeared. The words could be seen: "Fresh, available now, cut less than 24 hours ago." Seeing this scared the others a little. They were still young and naive. They knew the world had taken a turn for the worse, yet this seemed like a few steps too far. But even in the past, in the old age of the internet, there was a similar service like this called the dark web. Seeing this, Quinn started to read the description and found something strange. The item had been shrunk, wrapped, and filled with nitrogen to keep it as fresh as possible. It had also been dried of all blood, so the customer could only get the flesh itself. "Logan, could you check for me? Is there any way to get blood?" Quinn asked. The others thought that Quinn perhaps didn't want to rely on Layla or Vorden any longer. If he could get an endless supply online, that would be a big help for him. However, Quinn was hoping for a shortcut, but seeing the fact that dried of blood made him feel a little suspicious of the ensuing transaction. Logan did a quick type, and to his surprise, the screen said, "No results found." This was the dark marketplace. As long as there was a demand for something, then they would have it. Yet this time they didn't have blood? It was certainly strange. "I find it odd that there isn't blood on this. Regardless, even before vampires began to exist, some underground hospitals and groups would need them for emergencies. Perhaps I should look into this more." Logan continued to ponder on the subject. "So, are we able to order the flesh then?" Peter asked. Yes, I'll do that for you now," Logan replied. The flesh cost quite a sum. It was around 10,000 credits, the same price as an advanced tier beast core. However, Logan had covered the cost of the flesh for them. He stated that he would much rather let himself do this than allow them to go around the school. Although this was bad in its way, the flesh already existed in the marketplace. The person was dead, and there was nothing they could do. Once he placed the order online, just like in the marketplace, he had received a code. When the confirmation was sent, he was ready to receive his package. In his room, Logan had a teleporter receiver for packages. He often ordered things online and on the dark marketplace for parts for his gadgets. After typing the code in, the item suddenly appeared in a box. They opened it up, and it was shrunk, wrapped, and covered with ice, just like the order had said. Quinn used his inspection skill. Thereafter, the description stated that there wasn't a single part of it that had blood on them. After taking it out, they placed the meat in Peter's hands, and Logan couldn't stop staring at him. He was interested in seeing how Peter was able to eat the meat. Although Peter was a little shy, he quickly gobbled up the food. When he saw that it was similar to an animal eating meat, Logan lost his interest once again. 7 of 7 different consumed by your ghoul. Quest complete. Evolution process will begin. Almost at the same time as Quinn had received the notification from the system, a loud groan could be heard from behind him. "Peter, what's wrong? Are you okay?" Vorden said, with a worried expression. He was shaking Peter, who had fallen and was lying on the ground. Peter was clutching his tummy with both hands. He felt like a fire was spreading out from that point all over his body. "Guys, give him some space," Quinn said. "He's evolving. I don't know what he'll turn into or what's going to happen to him next." Quinn knew from his own experience how painful the process of evolving was, but more than that, he was worried about what Peter might turn into. Quinn had immediately asked the system what Peter would evolve into, but the response he received worried him. The system said there were many possibilities, and it couldn't predict which one Peter would evolve into. He had thought that completing his quest and letting Peter evolve would be the end of his problems, but once again, the system had kept some information from him. When lower-class creatures like ghouls evolved, there were many different classes they could change into. Sometimes, by using certain methods, the classes someone would evolve into could be influenced, but mostly it was a random process that depended on the situation and personality of the individual. Every class had its own set of skills, and some were rarer than others. But when Quinn found out about a specific class a ghoul could evolve into, he became very upset. It was the class known as the Wendigo. Out of all the classes Peter could evolve into, this was the worst. It was the only class that would require him to eat. But that was not the only issue with the class. The system had added that because they managed to feed Peter quickly, it wasn't likely he would turn into a Wendigo, but there were no guarantees. All of them stepped back to give Peter some space. Logan turned his spider bots into a cannon attached to his arm and aimed it at Peter. He hadn't covered his whole body this time, but just enough to create the cannon. Logan looked at the others with a determined look on his face. "I'm not taking any chances," Logan said. There are too many things left in this world that I still need to discover and investigate." Vorden agreed with him and thought his actions were very reasonable. He was glad Logan had something to point at Peter, because he only had the healing ability right now, and that wasn't any help if things went wrong with the evolution. The groans coming from Peter were getting louder, and he started to shake all over. This much pain he had never experienced before. It felt like something was trying to break all the bones in his body. As they nervously watched Peter, they started to see visible changes in his body. His skin began to shrink and tighten and turn white all over. He didn't look sick or weak. The scene reminded Vorden of what Quinn had looked like before his evolution into a full vampire. It looked like Peter's body hadn't lost any mass, but it looked like he was shriveling up and was dehydrated. "Hey, he's not turning into a Wendigo, is he?" Quinn asked the system. "I don't know for sure, but you should be prepared for the worst. I'll be honest with you, these are the signs of someone turning into one. If that's the case, I think it would be best to allow Logan to just kill Peter," the system replied. "But I thought you said I couldn't kill Peter. Also, why can't we just feed him again till he evolves, like last time?" Quinn asked, with a mix of fear and hope in his voice. "For your first question, as long as it is someone else who is going to kill Peter, and you don't try to abandon him at that moment, anyone can kill him. Secondly, unlike other classes, Wendigos can't evolve anymore, and unlike a ghoul, they aren't loyal to their master at all. They have lost their intelligence entirely and can only react based on instinct. They have only one thing on their mind, which is food. The only bit of loyalty they have left is that they won't attack their master, but for the rest of their undead lives, they will continue to hunt and kill humans to eat their flesh," the system replied, dashing Quinn's hope. Quinn didn't like the idea of it, but if Peter turned into a Wendigo, he had no other choice. Too many people had already gotten hurt. He had felt guilty about Peter's situation, which was why he was doing his best to help him, but this was a cost that would be too high, even for him. At the same time, there was something that was worrying Peter a lot more right now. His heartbeat was starting to slow down. With the pain on top of this, he thought perhaps he was dying. However, even though his heart wasn't beating anymore, he could still feel everything, and it didn't feel like he was dead at all. Then finally, his heartbeat had stopped entirely, and at the same time so did the pain. "Congratulations! Your ghoul has successfully evolved into a Wight. Blood ritual skill has evolved. 1 of 3 slots remaining for the cursed family." As Peter stood up from the floor, his face looked more sunken in than before, and his skin was slightly paler. Immediately, Peter grabbed his chest for some reason, and he held it there for a while, yet there was nothing. Not a single beat was felt. "Tell us your age, name, and where you are," Logan shouted. He had to make sure that Peter was right in the head. "I don't answer to you," Peter snapped. "I will only answer to one," he said, pointing at Quinn. Quinn then repeated the question. "Peter Chuck, 16, and we are inside Logan's room, sir." Satisfied with the answers, Logan put his hand down, but also made sure not to take the mechanical weapon. "Inspect. Name, Peter Chuck. Race, Wight. Stats will correspond with Creator until it reaches its limit." Seeing the last bit of information had given Quinn a surprise. This meant right now that Peter had the same stat points as Quinn. He was just as strong and just as fast. Although the second part would suggest it would continue to increase as long as Quinn got stronger, at some point it would reach a cap. "What is a Wight, though? Is it bad like the Wendigo or one of the better ones?" Quinn asked. "Why don't you use your inspect skill and see?" the system replied. "If you select the race option with your mind, it should pull up more information." Race, Wight. An undead creature which is fast and sneaky in the night. They are best used as a form of an assassin. Wights have a high level of intelligence, similar to humans, although their personalities could not be said to be the same. They are lawful to their creator, but once they see someone as their enemy, they will do everything in their power to get rid of them. Wights are immune to poison, sleep, paralysis, mind control, and diseases. They also contain a skill that will allow them to turn a killed victim into another lesser Wight. 0 of 2. Vorden could see Quinn taking in something. He noticed he did this from time to time, and then would eventually explain what was going on. Perhaps it was some sort of vampire skill or something, but it did make him wonder where he got all his vampire knowledge from. He had always assumed that it was Layla the vampire freak feeding him this information. "Is everything okay? Do we still need to feed him?" Vorden asked. "It's all right. Peter, you are no longer a ghoul. You're now something known as a Wight, Quinn replied. After explaining everything to Peter, he finally understood why his heart had stopped beating. He was an undead creature, no longer alive. Can I die, sir? Peter asked. Quinn found it strange that Peter kept referring him to sir, but could only assume it had something to do with his class change. It seemed to also cause a slight personality change in Peter as well. Well, you're already dead. There is no longer any need for you to eat, and your unnatural healing abilities will heal you most of the time. But if you do get hurt and you use too much energy, you will once again have to eat, although there is no longer any requirement for it to be fresh, Quinn explained as the system continued to inform him. Everyone in the room could finally relax and sit down. It was finally all over. Still, Peter had decided to leave the personality change that the system said a Wight would have. Since it seemed like Peter was being lawful to his creator like it said it would, it most likely meant the second part was genuine as well. If a Wight saw anyone as its enemy, then he would do everything he could to get rid of the person. As long as no one tried messing with him for now, everything should be okay. But there was one upcoming situation left that they had to deal with. That was worrying him about this. His next meeting with Duke is in a few days. I have a question, Vorden said. How did you figure out what we were up to? Vorden was sure he had covered all their tracks with Fex. The last thing he wanted to do was get caught, yet they did. If they had slipped up somewhere and Fex was able to find out, then this meant others could find out about what happened to them as well. Logan then walked over to Peter, who turned his head and gave him a dead-eye stare. Seeing this, Quinn immediately intervened. Peter, stop that! It was almost like an instinct for Quinn to do this, like he was telling off a bad dog growling at another person. The wristwatch had been removed, and Logan made a few adjustments using his glove before handing it back to Peter to put back on. For now, he had removed the listening device implanted. That's when he noticed that the heartbeat sensor inside hadn't indicated a signal in a while. If he had found this out too late, the guards would have rushed over. Although he didn't know why, he could only assume it had something to do with evolution. He decided to also make a fake signal so it would indicate that Peter was alive. Peter had become a lot less talkative, and at the same time, it seemed like he wasn't as timid as before. It was causing a strange atmosphere in the room. Peter, why don't you come over by me? Quinn said, noticing how everyone was feeling. Peter then walked over to where Quinn was, while constantly looking around the room as if he was watching out for any dangers. I planted a listening device into Peter's wristwatch when you asked me to make adjustments. I felt like you were hiding something, so this was the best cause of action. Hearing this news, Quinn felt like he had no right to be upset with Logan. He was hiding things from him, and even now, Quinn still hadn't told him a few things. It's okay. Logan, are we still friends? Quinn asked. We're friends? Logan replied with an odd look on his face. Of course. Friends help each other out, and you've helped me more than ever, Quinn explained. Well, if that's the case, this seems to be a one-way friendship, since you haven't helped out with anything at all yet, Logan replied. Although Logan sounded rude, he wasn't. Logan had always been honest like this and didn't know about human feelings.
Hi, Quinn here. Wondering what happens next? If you want to jump the queue and unleash all episodes, click on the link here and install the Pocket FM app.